right, so this time, Section 3, Unit 6, we are talking about the big business owners that came to power during this second industrial revolution following the Civil War. So, who are they and what did they do? First of all, we're going to have Carnegie Steel. Carnegie Steel is going to be known for its impact in the railroads, skyscrapers, and very importantly in the Navy. So when we see the Bessemer Steel process coming to the United States, Carnegie is going to really play on that idea. The Bessemer Steel process makes converting iron, which was a very expensive product to use to build these big skyscrapers, into a cheaper metal that does the job just as well, steel, increases the need for steel. And it's going to make the steel industry more valuable. When you can make a product cheaper that is just as good, people want that product. And what they wanted it for was for the railroads, to build the railroads to make them last longer, to build skyscrapers to make them taller, make them better, make them stronger, and to create ships that would make the United States look all powerful in its navy. Carnegie is going to invest his hard earned money into the steel industry, and his goal was to drive costs down and attempt to undersell all of his competition so that people would buy from him. He is going to use what we talked about last time, vertical integration, to build up his monopoly. He is going to buy all of those different stages of production. He's going to buy the railroad companies. He's going to buy the iron mines in order to keep his control in the steel industry. Carnegie's going to be the face of the rags to riches story. He's going to work his way up from being a mill worker in a small town outside of Pittsburgh to this big business tycoon. Now, Carnegie Steel is going to be known for its terrible, dangerous working conditions. Okay, it is not a safe place to work in a steel mill at this time. Okay, they're dark, they're dirty, not to mention that you have burning fires and liquid metal that you're working around. So he's going to be known for paying his workers very little money and the terrible conditions that they're subjected to and extremely long hours to meet the demand for steel at this time. But those actions that make him a robber baron have also been compared to his actions in his later years, where he donated money to build over 3,000 libraries, where he donated money to create Carnegie Mellon, the university, and the money that he donated to build Carnegie Hall. So Carnegie really is this picture of the fact that you could be a robber baron throughout your entire life, build your wealth on the backs of your workers that you work to death, and be a captain of industry in your later years, in your death, where you really add to society, make it better. Second guy that we need to talk about is John D. Rockefeller. He is going to be the first billionaire, that's with a capital B, billionaire in the United States. So Rockefeller is not going to be the first guy to drill for oil. That's actually going to be Edwin Drake. He's going to be the first man to drill for oil. And before we started drilling for oil for the purposes that we needed it for came from whale fats. That was a very long and very difficult process, and the refining of that oil that we had was also a very difficult process. So oil was not something that the nation relied upon, not very popular. Rockefeller comes in though, and he is going to be the poster child for capitalism, really working from rags in his childhood to riches and finding a way to make money that was unique, to create a need where people didn't even know there was a need. He is going to introduce new techniques to the oil industry by using the waste product from converting crude oil to kerosene. And then kerosene that was used to light homes becomes a cheaper product that everyone can afford. And when he makes a product that everyone can afford, he widens up who is purchasing. He is also going to be known for the relationship that he has with the railroads. Rockefeller is producing mass amounts of kerosene that people are going to need in their homes across the country. He's got to have somebody to move that product, which is where the railroads come in. He and the railroads are going to have a sort of cartel between the two businesses where the railroads give him rebates or kickbacks or discounts to move his oil. And because he has such a large amount of his product, the railroads are going to need him. The railroads are going to want his business, so they'll do anything to make that happen. What really skyrockets Rockefeller is going to be the invention of the car, which is going to come much later in his lifetime. And that creates a different demand in the oil industry, which was great because once electricity comes along, not a whole bunch of need for kerosene lamps everywhere, but the car is going to keep up with keeping him in money. Rockefeller is also going to be known for his terrible practices of cutting out the competition, the poor conditions that his laborers will work within. He even purchases a substitute to dodge the military draft. So, not necessarily the best guy, but again, even though he has these actions throughout his life that would consider him a robber baron, in his death, he's going to donate half of his fortune to charities, churches, the arts, giving him that mark of a captain of industry, which throughout his lifetime hadn't been the case. You can see in the political cartoon down at the bottom this relationship that I talked about last time between people like Rockefeller, the owners of big business, and the government. Notice Rockefeller in his hand is holding the Capitol building, or he's holding the White House, showing in the palm of his hand he has the White House to do whatever he wants. And in the background, you see the Capitol building portrayed as an oil refinery with the smokestacks, and you see the water there, all oil, showing the control Rockefeller had over the government as well. Because of the money he was making, the government will turn a blind eye to the actions that he used to make that money. Another guy we need to look at that was a leading big business person at this time is Cornelius Vanderbilt. He is going to be known for his work in the steamships and railroad industry. In the 1820s, so much earlier than the mark of the beginning of the Second Industrial Revolution, Vanderbilt is going to be known for his control in the steamboat industry. He's going to learn from his father, who also worked in the steamboat, ferry boat industry, operating ferry lines in New York between Staten Island and the mainland. Vanderbilt is going to be known for his ruthless practices in business that he used to drive out his competitors. In the 1850s, though, we're going to see a shift of where we want to go in the United States with the gold rush. When gold is discovered in the West, everybody thinks that this is the new get rich quick scheme, and they want to figure out how to get to the West. Now, Vanderbilt had the good fortune of owning the fastest route by steamship to the West. Now, this is a time before the railroads had built the Transcontinental Railroad, and your options were take the steamship, which kind of went all the way around to the other side, or take a covered wagon across the United States. So because Vanderbilt had owned that route, many people used his steamships to get to the West Coast to try to find that gold. During the Civil War, Vanderbilt is going to donate a fleet of his ships to help the war efforts of the North. But again, much like we saw with Rockefeller, steamships are going to kind of fall by the wayside when the railroads begin to be built, and that's what people are using not only for transportation but to move their product as well. And when this happens, you're going to see Vanderbilt, like any great business leader, switch the specialization that he has. And Vanderbilt is going to buy into and become a real tycoon in the railroad industry. He is going to acquire all of the tracks between New York and Chicago, two major cities at the time. And if you wanted to go between those two places, more than likely you were riding a railroad owned by Vanderbilt. So shifting with the times, with the advancement of transportation and keeping his wealth in that way. Now, the three guys that we've talked about so far, Carnegie, Rockefeller, Vanderbilt, each of these men built their businesses from the ground up. They were the true rags to riches story, entrepreneurs of their time, learning business from the outside in to build into the millionaires and billionaires that they were. But the last guy that we're talking about had a little bit of a different story. Maybe you've heard this name before, Morgan, J.P. Morgan. He is going to be in the banking and finance industry. Morgan is going to be born into a wealthy family. So he doesn't start at the bottom like the others. He comes from a wealthy family where he was groomed by his father to take an executive role in the family business. His father had already made a name for himself. It was just Morgan's job to come in and continue the family business. What Morgan realizes is that in order to make the most money, you don't have to specialize in just one area. Instead, you need to invest or purchase parts of companies, majority parts of companies, in all of the different industries. So he's going to own businesses in the railroad industry, in the steel industry. He's going to help in the construction of bridges. He is so wealthy that in 1902 he pays $500 million for Carnegie Steel. He buys one of the big businesses that we talked about originally. Because Morgan has a hand, as he's illustrated in this political cartoon as an octopus, because he has a hand in so many different markets, he's going to be accused of having too much power, so much power that he can manipulate any business that he wants to. What Morgan ultimately shows us, though, is that it wasn't necessary to be a builder to be successful. If you were smart enough to invest and efficient in consolidating different businesses, which means combining, buying, and combining, you could make lots of money that way. You just had to be smart about where you put your money and when. Morgan is incredibly interesting because he, during the Panic of 1873, is going to help the United States come out on the other side. Remember, a panic is an economic depression. We see during that time, we see high unemployment. When people are unemployed, they stop buying, which means that the economy is taking that downturn. During that panic, Morgan is going to give the United States government gold from his personal fortunes to avoid inflation, because when the government prints a whole bunch of money and they don't have any actual solid backing to it, means that our money becomes worthless. In order to avoid that from happening, Morgan, who is so wealthy, gives the government gold to make sure we avoid inflation. That's how wealthy he was. So a little bit of different structure here, but we have Carnegie, Rockefeller, Vanderbilt being these controllers of their own specific industries, and then you have Morgan, who controlled anything he put his money into. So different pathways to wealth, but wealthy all the same. The next time we come together, we are going to talk about where is the government in all of this building of big business? What is their role and what are they doing?